when I said I'd do a countdown once per month? That's all the pre-intro comedy I need. Happy Christmas, Merry New Year, whatever the heck holiday it is when I feel like uploading this, welcome. So, 2016, it's happened. I'm not going to pretend that this year had nothing bad going on, but lordy what a roller coaster this has been, for games alone. Let's just say keeping up with all this wasn't easy for a broke college student, but for just a moment, let's actually act like human beings and acknowledge some good that came from it, because there sure was a lot to work with. I personally couldn't experience all of it because, again, broke college student, but I have enough to work with to have another go at a personal year-end list. You know how these lists work. Anything goes, so long as I started playing these games at some point in 2016, and, well, I have to like them enough, no duh. I'm well aware of the possible issue of my placements not holding up, something that really fucks over last year's list, but somehow I don't see that happening this time. We can all use a little faith, right? I've been trying to get into the Mega Man series for a while now. I, played 1, 2, 9, and 10. The only one I beat was 10, though. I tried X, but stopped for some reason. I tried 0, 1, but stopped for some reason. Maybe it's because I'm bad at video games. That sounds reasonable. Well, we live in an age where spiritual successors seem to work out for most cases, and after a go at Azure Striker Gunvolt, I'm reminded of a lot of things. Like, it takes the ass-kicking that a lot of the Mega Man games and their spin-offs have. But hey, maybe it's supposed to be that way, so I can't say it's hard, even though that's exactly what it is, right? Alright, nice, glad we can establish that so quickly. But it's not like it's hard to a point where you don't have options to counteract them, at least not always. Azure Striker Gunvolt is a lot like those side-scrolling action platformers. You jump, shoot, dash, it's all well and good. What sets Gunvolt out for most games within the genre is the tagging mechanic that your weapons have. If you shoot an enemy, then they'll be marked so you can blast them the kingdom fuck because you're a walking EMP. There's also a ranking system that better rewards you for chaining combos, a speedrun mode that's, well, just that, and a story mode where you have to adopt a little girl that is threatened by a bunch of supernatural fuckfaces. But I'm concentrating on trying to kill everything on screen with my pew-pew gun and my massive electricity barrier. Doesn't always work out, and you're going to have to use your brain to get around most of this, but if you're anything like me, good luck! So, in light of Uncharted 4 coming out, I wanted to play the franchise in full before I got around to it, since it came packaged with my PS4. Yeah, that kinda fucked itself. Not that the games were bad, I just wouldn't know. Never really got around to it, so most of that collection's making friends with the rest of my backlog. Oh well, at least I played the first game, and it's pretty good. I've heard decent things about the pre-remastered Drake's Fortune, despite how ultimately successful it is. Of course, I wouldn't know, but I've heard that the original pushes the PS3 so far beyond its limits, sometimes you notice when it cracks. Drake's Fortune Remastered is more than just a prettier picture. Now, I'm not a frame rate whore, nor do I particularly care that much for cover systems, but technically speaking, this game is a huge step up that actually got me invested. The 60 FPS hardly drops, and even when it does, it's not that noticeable. Input latency is reduced, and the aiming is subtly changed to where you can easily aim your weapons. Even beyond all the techno mumbo-jumbo, the biggest reason I even cared to continue was Nathan Drake himself. Good old Naughty Dog's take on Indiana Jones is so well written. The guy can play off almost anything and anyone. He's got some sass, but in one of the most likable ways possible. I mean, you might as well if you're gonna risk your life on any adventure. Sure, the story kind of falls apart in the end, the antagonists suck dick, and you'll be caught off guard by enemies 9 times out of 10. But when looking at the bigger picture, this is a solid game on its own merits. I get that a lot of original players may be put off because of any flaws in the vanilla version, but I mean, the remastered collection's still there. It's like you guys hate optimism. Roguelikes as a genre have always interested me. With most video games, the material's set out in front of you and is set in store as long as the game exists. Roguelikes only apply this to an extent. You'll know your challenges, but not when, because the layouts and collectibles are randomized with each session, and when you die, you start from scratch. It encourages a much more apparent gap for improvement because, well, you will die, and die a lot. I've played a handful of them up to this point, but I feel none of them have as much, charm as Rogue Legacy. It starts with a vicious cycle. You'll boot up the game for the first time and have a copious amount of runs that last 30 seconds to a minute on average. And it's not like it's the game's fault though, at least primarily. The controls are fluid enough to where if you screw up, suddenly it starts to fall back on you, but without being over demanding. Look, I appreciate a game that punishes you for your slip-ups as the next guy, but do people just forget that slip-ups can be accidental? Regardless, the game doesn't shut the door completely. You're always going to be working towards upgrades, such as more health, more attack damage, and even more classes. Speaking of, I think what really sets Rogue Legacy apart from other games in the genre is how you're not always playing as a blank slate that will soon be upgraded. Rogue Legacy has a lot of attributes, making for a ton of different combinations to choose from. Let me put it like this. You can go from a dyslexic assassin to a far-sighted miner to a gay barbarian. Any game that writes the comedy formula will make this hobby a hell of a lot easier. You know, I could spend the rest of my days talking about games that are ball-busting action classics or symbolism-heavy experience titles, but at the end of the day, sometimes we all have to take a step back and boot up something from Jackbox. I grant you that Jackbox games can come with a sense of panic when you can't come up with jack shit under the final seconds of the timer, but let's pretend that none of that exists and focus on how entertaining of a party game Drawful 2 is. The premise is simple. Everyone draws a thing based on the prompts they are given, and everyone tries to trick each other with guessing the fake prompts they come up with as well. A common rule that comes when playing Drawful 2, or hell, its prequel, is that no matter what, you're always going to be bad at drawing. Even if you think that you're good at art in general, that notion will die when you play this game. Let's just say good luck drawing in a compacted space with either your finger or a mouse. And if you are good, then I hope that giant dick you flaunt around gets caught in the ceiling fan, not to mention that you don't get an eraser. So, how inadequate do you feel now? Huh? Now that's fun and all, but what does Drawful 2 have that the original doesn't? Well, for one, you can draw in 2 colors! That's a big deal in this type of game, I swear. Oh, but don't worry, if you get tired of the same old prompts, Drawful 2 introduces the concept of creating your own series of prompts, or episodes. So, you too can have all your funny inside memes. No one man should have all that power. I began to contemplate whether or not I should include early access games or not. That's part of the reason why I didn't include Ruby Grim Eclipse on last year's list. It wasn't finished. But if I can be blunt, they're still games, right? Like, early access games are one thing, but we're still calling them games. After all, taking a couple risks can actually work out instead of playing it safe all the time, which is knowledge I think a lot of my Countdown colleagues should learn. Golf with Your Friends is a video game where you simulate playing mini-golf. I'd love to explain more mechanics, but that's literally all you're doing, just mini-golf. Well, okay, that's not entirely true. You can set modifiers such as jumping, ball-shaped collision. There's a lot of options that are either really fun or really asinine. Depends on how your day is going. There are only 4 maps as of now, but not only will the modifiers keep you busy, but there are more on the way because, well, early access. Hell, they're even planning to add an in-game store, more customization options, and even a level editor. They're setting the bar pretty high, but the base game is already fun as hell, so I'll keep the optimism. I've stated in previous videos before that you can have the most simplistic of concepts in the world, and you still win me over depending on how you structure your game. Unfortunately, with the features not yet implemented in the game, you can't really judge the game as a whole yet, but with what we have now, it's good. So for those of you that even care, you'd probably remember when I did this sort of list last year, I reserved a spot for the ultimate who fucking cares game, Saints Row 4. You know the story. The game flat out doesn't give a shit and has some of the most batshit insane premises I've seen in a video game. Well, looky, I got to play myself some Gat Out of Hell, and I'm glad I did. So how do you follow up aliens invading your world and placing you in a simulation of Saints Row the 3rd? Well, Volition and High Voltage Software must have had issues thinking of a way to follow this up. So they decided to have your character creation from Saints Row 4 get kidnapped and sent straight to hell. So you play as his friends, Johnny Gat and or Kinsey, so you can rescue them from being married to Satan's daughter, Jezebel. So can we petition to rename this series to What Happens on a Tuesday? In terms of gameplay, it's mostly the same as Saints Row 4, but with a few exceptions. For one, instead of gliding, you are met with angelic flight because, well, we gotta have a contrast to hell somehow. Not to mention that progress in the game is determined by Satan's wrath, in which you complete quests that make him mad and stuff. Aside from plot and fitting aesthetics, this is pretty much a Saints Row 4 2, but it doesn't make it any less enjoyable. Admittedly, the shock value for certain moments is diminished because, well, look where you're at. But on the other hand, you have a cutscene where the main characters are in a musical number.
You think because you're my daughter, you think that you're above it all. Robobot schemes are currently in motion. Your choice, be a wife or be a thrall.
You know, there are so many concepts for games nowadays that when I eventually get to talk about them, it's pretty much impossible that I can think of a way to open up a segment. Maybe it's because I'm a lazy writer, but take this into perspective. Kirby in a mech. I'm dropping the mic on this shit. This deserves no introduction. And it's totally not because I have writer's block as of writing this. Help! Admittedly, the concept of Kirby in a mech might sound jarring to some, but at the end of the day, Kirby Planet Robobot made it come off as something the Kirby series needed to try. The Robobot armor mechanic doesn't overshadow the standard eat your enemies and copy their abilities, but it's not some sort of super duper fuck the rest of the level abilities that the previous iteration signed. These sections can go from a side-scrolling shooter to a platforming puzzle game and then back to the shooting again. Controlling the Robobot armor even has some genuine weight to it, and it can absorb copy abilities as well. Special mention going to the wheel and jet sections. And when you aren't going, anime reference, in certain parts, but you even have new copy abilities to play with, a true arena that's hard as fuck, Meta Nightmare returns, and even the main story has a new villain that's admittedly tragic if you take the time to pause and read the synopses of the boss fights with him. Even with all the machinery floating about, it doesn't take away from any of the cuteness that the Kirby games typically provide. Now that's an accomplishment. Being a Naruto fan fucking sucks. Oh, I'm sorry, with all the memes that surround it being cancer, I'm supposed to turn my feelings from, hey, I like this, to a guilty pleasure? Thanks, internet, you stupid ah well, at least CyberConnect know how to make it look, oh hey, I can unironically enjoy this without feeling bad. Yeah, no, I still have the scars. But you know, I've always said if you're going to experience anything Naruto related, it would be the games. Well, what I actually meant by games is the Ultimate Ninja Storm series. If you haven't kept up with me, more specifically my Twitter, wink wink, then you know that this last outing was my most hyped game for a while. And to say it was worth it is more of an understatement than saying something like, Hello Games did a no-no. Putting this iteration on the PS4 and Xbox One meant that this game pushes its spectacle even further. Never has a game in this series looked as vibrant and colorful as this. I mean, it's something that you have to do if you want to crank up your anime games to DBZ levels of fuck. Sure, the combat's a bit basic, but everything controls well enough anyway, and landing the ultimate jutsus is satisfying as fuck, so I can look past that. Aside from that, the only really major thing that Storm 4 introduces, aside from new characters to play with and new ultimates to bask, is a leader system in a 3v3 that finally allows you to switch fighters, thank fuck. There's not much I can talk about Storm 4 specifically without speaking generally, but it's still everything I wanted and then some. And with the Boruto expansion that comes out in February, oh man, you guys will think I'm dead, maybe. For a while now, I wasn't really on the whole Overwatch hype train. I don't know if you all knew this, but first-person shooters, regardless of arena likes, I'm not a fan. I don't know, I tried to get into them, but I couldn't. But it's okay, I don't do mainstream esports orgies. I have Battleborn now. Okay, despite my opinion on the genre and other games like it, Overwatch is actually a lot of fucking fun and deserves almost every ounce of notoriety it has gathered. Hey, if I brought up TF2 enough times, do you think people will get mad? Okay, but legit, I'm happy that such a game like Overwatch can be so accessible to FPS shitlords like myself. Overwatch has a cast of 23 characters, and while some are noticeably better than others, you can make a case that no character can be considered unviable. And there's enough options to keep you going for a long time. I think they were trying to appeal with as many people as possible. You got Gamer Girl, Deep Throat number 3, Grandpa with the nice shades. If you ask me to make an edgy joke, I'll shank you. If you ask me to make a Harambe joke, I'll shank you. Robo Buddha, they didn't go wrong with any of these heroes, is my point. Almost any time I go back to a hero after using other ones for a while, I find something new about them, and it's so satisfying to me when everything just clicks like that. Hell, it's one thing to have a bunch of characters to play, it's another to make it look so stunning. All I'm saying is cherry blossom trees and anything surrounding Lijiang Tower are my environmental fetishes. Yeah. It's Pokemon. Now let's be real here. If it wasn't Overwatch, what in the holy hell else could it have been? Mario Brothers? What are you, stupid? Now I won't lie, there are noticeable problems that the games have. The first hour or so is pretty slow, EV training's less accessible, certain features were spaced out horribly, sometimes the game chugs along in certain battles, more so in the normal 3DS, and while a personal thing, I spoiled myself rotten to the core before these games came out. But if I may, none of these problems can even come close to being close to diminishing what a hell of an experience playing Pokemon Sun and Moon were. Let me put it like this. I can't recall the last time I beat a game twice in the month span of its launch. With the other games I mentioned, I can pinpoint 1, 2, maybe 3 major reasons as to why I enjoyed the games as much as I did. This is a case of enjoying the entire package. The 3DS is pushed beyond its limits by using full-blown 3D environments and actual proportionate character models, as opposed to toddlers from Gen 6. The story develops very nicely, and I can't be fucked to think of a single character I even dislike, since they're all important in their own ways. The music is damn wonderful, ranging from tropical themes, because, you know, motifs, to the gangster-style music of Team Skull, to all the orchestral masterpieces in between. The new Pokemon, while most of them aren't really all that fast, are well thought out and actually feel like they belong in the Alolan region, and even introducing new variants of classic Pokemon. Not only that, but the main format has completely changed. Gone are the gym leaders and in with the island trials that are different enough to feel different while not being boring most of the time, only to be topped off with a really powerful Pokemon or the island's kahuna. I can go on and on about all the other features like Z moves, the removal of HMs, being able to get use out of Pokemon even in your PCs, but I think you all would like it if the point wasn't bashing your skull. Nintendo's hyped the hell out of these titles, and they had every right to. When you have another game in the sidelines butt-fucking the mainstream, you have to do something to make sure people will buy your new game. And we all ate that shit up, and it was absolutely fantastic. Well, it's been a while since I made one of these, huh? I won't lie, this was the hardest countdown I've ever had to write. Not because of the topic or its candidates, but mostly because I kind of forgot how to write countdowns. I guess it's what happens when you not only have been in college, but most of your work has half of the material written for you. Hey, I didn't expect to be lured in by commentaries either, but they're just so damn fun to make. I'm hoping next year I can balance out the type of content I want to make, but I'll go more into detail about that in a future update. Again, as well as addressing of a lot of things I really feel like I should address. Let me put it like this. How many of you even know or even remember that I have a Patreon? Yeah, something needs to be done about that. But not now. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my holiday, and I hope you all do the same.